All right, guys. Thanks for joining us here today. For the best viewing experience, please set this streaming presentation quality manually to 720p.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining us here today.
I'm your host, Josh Stinson with CodeEnvy. Thank you for attending CheConf16 2016. In this session, our presenters, Brad Mickley with CodeEnvy, will share with you his presentation on CodeEnvy Che for Enterprises. We have Che committers in the conference chat who will do their best to answer all your questions. If your question doesn't get answered, contact us on our GitHub repo. Brad, when you're ready, feel free to get started.
Thanks, Josh. And thank you, everyone, for coming and joining me for this presentation. So today, I'm going to talk a little bit about CodeEnvy, or kind of Eclipse Che for Enterprises, as I like to call it. So let me get the presentation going here and share my screen. All right. So the question today is, how is Che different than CodeEnvy, and how is CodeEnvy different than Che? So CodeEnvy, like I said, we kind of think of ourselves as Che for enterprises. We take the fantastic guts of Eclipse Che and kind of create a certified Eclipse Che package. You can kind of think of the relationship between Eclipse Che and the CodeEnvy Enterprise subscription as being similar to the relationship between Linux and Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So we're kind of seeking to create something that is more enterprise friendly, more secure and hardened, perfect for large teams, organizations, and enterprises. Some of the things we add. Multi-tenancy is a big one, multi-user. Workspace automation. I'm going to show you the Jira plugin and the Jenkins integrations today. We also add a permissions API, allow you to add a little bit more granularity and security around your workspaces. And then, of course, because this needs to be managed typically for hundreds or sometimes thousands of developers within an organization, we need a DevOps infrastructure, something that's going to handle clustering and node management and upgrades, resource management, the ability to kind of prevent developers from having too much RAM and potentially using too many resources, as well as, of course, backup recovery and data migration. And then we wrap all this stuff in enterprise support and optional services. So the pain that we're looking to solve for especially large organizations is developer bootstrapping. And this is something that has been touched on, I think, in a couple of the other presentations today. But I really want to kind of dig into it. So when I talk to organizations, and I speak to many of them every week, I hear something very, very similar. And it looks like this, that bootstrapping today really does typically take days, and sometimes, in some cases, weeks per developer. And often the amount of time is going to increase with the security sensitivity of the organizations. And there's a lot of reasons why this doesn't work. Typically, the default is that this is going to rely on manual configuration or scripts. Sometimes people are trying to use VMs, but the difficulty there is that they're huge and they're difficult to synchronize and keep synchronized over time. So you get this kind of friction where often operations looks at the hundreds or thousands of laptops out there and sees a massive attack surface, a huge security risk, and immediately tries to start locking down. But as devs, we need control. And so we're always trying to find ways to kind of deke away from ops and get that control and figure out how to get the root access. And so you get this unhealthy friction. So the solution that we're doing with Che, of course, overall, and then scaled out for large enterprises with CodeEnvy, is where the developer doesn't install anything locally, and workspaces are cloned and resized, they're shared, and you have all this great collaboration. But I think what is perhaps not as obvious is that one of the biggest fans of CodeEnvy in the organizations I talk to, not even just the developers, it's actually the ops people. Because for the ops people, they look at this at first and say, whoa, hold on. This is something cloud-based. That sounds scary. I don't like it. No, don't even think about it. And then when it's explained to them that, hey, you know what, with this, the source code doesn't land on the developer machine. Suddenly your worry about how do I secure hundreds of laptops out in the wild becomes how do I secure several clustered servers inside my private cloud, inside my data center, wherever that is, but behind my firewall, that I as an ops person already know how to control. Suddenly they break out a big smile and they're like, this is a great solution. We absolutely want this. And so that's kind of really gratifying for us to have built something that we know is great for developers and have it accepted and exciting for ops as well. All right, so let's quit it with the slides. And let's actually start our demo somewhere a little different. I'm going to start our demo in Jira. So, of course, in an organization, one of the key questions is how do you organize the dev team? And most people that I speak to are using some kind of issue management system. But you know what? Even if you're not, I'm going to explain kind of how you could have a very similar workflow, even without a fancy issue management system. Now, in this case, I'm using Jira. And you can see that I've got my Jira project, I've got my Jira issue, and everything looks pretty standard, except for these two labels, review and develop. Now, these are super important, and this is what our plugin does, is it basically allows you to define a particular project in Jira and say, I want to kind of code enviatize that project. And by doing that, you create a link between that project in Jira and the code envy infrastructure, such that when you create a new issue of specific type within that code envy enabled project, it's going to automatically build for you a set of factories. So let's pause for a second and talk about workspace automation. One of the great things that CodeEnvy adds to Che is workspace automation, and we do it through something called factories. So a factory is basically a way to template an environment or a workspace for a set of developers and then expose it through a simple URL. So when I click on this URL, I don't need to know anything about this project. I don't need to know what language it is. I don't need to know what runtime it uses, nothing. I just click on a link, and this is going to open up a CodeEnvy instance. Now, in this particular case, you'll see I'm using CodeEnvy.io, our hosted system. That's really just out of convenience. For an enterprise, of course, this would go to a private CodeEnvy install, as I said, behind their firewall. And you'll see in this case, I'm using kind of an enterprise-ish environment. I've got a database and my dev machine kind of running side by side. So this is going to start up. It'll take a few minutes. And this is something that those of you who've been with us all day, first of all, awesome, thank you. You will have seen this in, or part of this, in Florent's presentation on how to kind of host your own code in Che. He also ran this multi-container workflow. So this is now starting the containers and starting the agents and getting everything going. At no point, remember, am I downloading anything. And because this is a multi-tenanted system, you can see I have my own identity here. I have my profile information. I can administer my account. I can log out. I can change accounts. And you can connect CodeEnvy to a corporate LDAP. You can connect it through OAuth, or just allow people to self-service much like they would on the web. So now my workspace is started. You can see it's opened up a couple files for me automatically. These might be the files that I'm kind of most commonly editing, or maybe these are the ones that new users have to start out with. Right now, we're processing the files. That's why you got those little errors, and now they're gone because we've processed the file and everything is good. And you see I've got two terminals. So let's go ahead and split this. I want to do a database terminal in the other one, and let's do my database command. Now, I am not a database expert, so I don't actually know how to show databases in MySQL, but of course I don't need to. There we go. You can see I've executed the show database command and my pet clinic database is there. I'm just going to make a little more room. And now over here, I want to actually build and run this guy. So I'm building and deploying this multi-container app. And it's going to take a minute as it hits Hibernate to go and kind of do all of the data management stuff between the app and the database. But other than that, you can see that this is identical interface to Che because, of course, it is Che. Everything that gets improved in Che is kind of immediately available in CodeEnvy. So as a developer, all I've done, remember, is click on a link, and I jump into this. Now, while this is loading, let me jump back to Jira for a second and explain the difference between the develop and the review links. So the develop link assumes that I'm a developer. And so The developer wants to be able to start in the container. They want to be able to start in the workspace, put it away, come back the next day, and have it start in exactly the same space they were right when they left the day before, or the hour before, or the week before. So it's going to kind of act as a bookmark. Anytime I click this link, if I've opened it before, it's always going to go back to the same spot I was before. The review link is a little different. The review link assumes that I don't care to go back to my previous work. I'm just going to trash it, because what I want to do with the review link is just look at what is the most current state. This is perfect for folks in docs, or product managers, or business stakeholders, maybe QA people even. So folks who want to see where are we at kind of up to the minute, rather than harassing a developer, they can click this. They'll get an identical workspace in structure. The only difference is that as soon as they close the tab, it'll get trashed. And when they click the link again, it'll pull new right from the head of master, as opposed to with this one, pulling from the, the last commit I made. All right, so this I think has started now. Let's see if I'm right. It's going to start into my container. You can see that it's opening on a specific node in CodeEnvy, and maybe it hadn't quite started yet. Close, but no cigar. Oh, there we go. OK, so there's the app. It's running. And as many of you know, I can take this URL. Again, if this was in a private behind the firewall, I would have no problem in sending this to other people. So even before I've gone and merged my code, I can grab this, send it to a stakeholder and say, hey, what do you think of my massive UI changes? I've changed everything to pink. Is that OK with you? And the response might be great, merge away, or the response might be no, 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 back it out, reverse. And at least this way, I can have done that before I went and did my git push and moved everything into the repo. So it can help kind of avoid some of those frustrating times when you commit to the repo, goes to test, somebody looks at it and says, no, it's terrible, yank it out. And then you got to go back and kind of undo all your changes. So now let's assume that it was good. It's all great. I commit to the repo, and things go forward. One of the next things going to happen is I'm going to get a build from my CI system. And sometimes, unfortunately, we live in a world where things don't always work. And so I might have gotten a build failure. So this is a build failure email from Jenkins. And this is another one of the integrations that you can do with CodeEnvy, where we're actually, again, intercepting that build failure event within Jenkins. And when it happens, we are going back to CodeEnvy and saying, hey, give me a perfectly tailored workspace for this specific build failure. What does that mean? It means I'm going to look for the right project that this is referring to, that is trying to build. And I'm going to grab that kind of base factory for that project and use that as my foundation. Then I'm going to customize that factory and say, OK, I've got the right project. Now I need the right branch, because this build was done on some kind of branch. So OK, put me into that branch. And now put me into the exact commit location where this build failed. So that even if 3 more builds run, I can investigate this particular build failure anytime and be returned to exactly the right spot. It's like a bookmark. So now when I click this, it's going to open up another tab. I've probably used up all my RAM allocation over here. So let me stop my multi-container workspace and jump back over here. And this is now going to open up a new workspace. Normally, of course, if I was in my own private install, I wouldn't have needed to stop my other workspace, because I can run multiple workspaces side by side as long as I have sufficient resources. So now once this starts, what we'll see is that the problem here, the error rather that we saw, was in the POM. So in fact, we can figure that out sometimes. Not all build failed issues are kind of determinable like this. But in cases where they are, like in this one, we can actually have it open up automatically with the pom.xml displayed for the user. So once again, kind of removing some of those little steps that developers have to take on the way to diagnosing the problem. So this really gets me bang right into the location of the project. Once again, I don't necessarily need to be an expert in this project, although if I'm diagnosing a failed build, I probably am, because it's going to kind of help figure a lot of that stuff out for me. So magic of factories is kind of, I think, the short answer for what you guys have just seen. So let's take a quick look at what it takes to build one, because you're probably thinking, well, these factories sound complicated. They're probably pretty hard. But we've worked a lot to make them easy. So when I go to create a factory, the easiest way to do it is to create one from an existing workspace. Although I could create one from scratch from a Git repo, or I can pass around factory and workspace config files within my dev team and use that. I can even start just from scratch and just write it freehand, but you gotta be pretty hardcore to do that. I let Florent do that for me. So in this case, I'm just gonna choose a workspace. I'm gonna call this one Rosin because I don't actually remember what this is. And I'm gonna open that up and right away, there you go. I've got my factory, it was that easy. We provide 2 links. One of them where it indicates the name of the workspace and the name of the user who created the workspace in the URL itself. That can be very helpful within the team where it's trusted members and you want to be able to quickly differentiate what's what. Or we create one that's obscured in the event that you want to hand this to somebody outside and maybe you don't want them to know all these details. Either way, I can use my current recipe or I can actually substitute. I can say, I love this workspace, but I want to make some tweaks for everybody else because maybe I use some tools that nobody else uses in my team. Great, I can go and I can customize that stack that is used. And you guys saw in the earlier session with Florent how you can customize those stacks. Not hard. I control the RAM. I can go and add or remove any of my specific commands. I see now this is a PHP, so I can do whatever I want. I actually change the command syntax itself if I wanted to as well. I can have some of these commands auto-run. So if I want this to automatically start Apache when I jump in, I can do that. Or I can have it automatically open a file, as you saw in the example with the pom.xml. And of course, we show you the JSON that the factory is defined in as well, so that if you do want to see that out of curiosity, we all love to kind of know how things work under the hood, right? Or if you want to edit it, you can always do that. Any changes I make, all I got to do is drop them in here, and it'll be auto-saved. I grab the link, I send it out to everybody. If I've already shared this link, it doesn't change. So if everybody's already using this factory and I go and reconfigure something, I don't need to send them all out a new link. So quite convenient. All right, so hopefully that was a good kind of summary. So let's take a look just very quickly at what we saw. So I created an issue in Jira and I got my kind of developer workflow. It was the issue is tied to the workspace. What actually I didn't show is that it's actually branched, and that branch is named for the Jira ID of that particular issue. So even somebody looking in the repo has a very nice organized view, knows exactly what issues are being worked on from a branching perspective. It's of course synced with VCS. You've got a pull request panel. You can share and collaborate. You've got diff, you've got merge, all those features that you know from Che. And then if I do a pull request, I can also create a reviewer workflow, or if I'm in Jira, I can use the reviewer button. And that, of course, is going to be able to automatically build and run, for example. They can make changes, or you can prevent them from making changes using the permissions API. And you guys saw in just a session or two ago, pair programming is coming. So that's even cooler. Great new way to do reviews as well. And I'm losing control of my mouse here. Pull requests as well can be done. This embeds the factory link directly into the pull request in, for example, GitHub. Allows people to still comment, still use that GitHub interface for pull requests, for example, but just makes it really easy for them to run the changed code, which isn't always a simple thing to do with a standard IDE configuration. If you're looking to get started with CodeEnvy, there are a couple different packages. If you're going to host CodeEnvy at your organization, and this is essentially what kind of 100% of our enterprise customers do, you install it behind your firewall. Your admins now have full control over security. They have full control over configuration, resource utilization, administration, integrations, all that awesome stuff. You can have private repositories, private registries, private Jira, the whole thing. And of course, if you wanted to, we can even, as we did with the Samsung IDE in the last session, white label it. In other words, kind of rebrand it for you. integrated into your own workflows. So for now, that's $350 per user per year, but I've got to warn you that is going to go up come 2017. On the other hand, if you're a smaller team, let's say that you're just 3 people, 5 people, maybe you don't need something quite so, powerful as the full private CodeEnvy system. You are, of course, welcome to use CodeEnvy.io. That's hosted in our public cloud. You can still use private repos. You can still use private registries. But you will not really be able to integrate with, with private Jira, private Jenkins, things like that. Today, you're limited to 3 GB of RAM for workspaces per account, and that is free. Come the new year, we're going to be releasing kind of a team extension for CodeEnvy.io. It's going to allow you to purchase more RAM, purchase longer timeouts, add team members. It's going to be really great, I think, for teams of, let's say, 9, 10 or less people. Kind of in that little middle ground before you're quite big enough to want to handle it yourself, but bigger than wanting to just work with the free workspaces on CodeEnvy.io. Other exciting news. You might have heard Tyler talk about this in the keynote. CodeEnvy has now been Dockerized, which is fantastic. I've been playing with this over the last few days myself. Admittedly, as a multi-container system, orchestrating Docker internally, this was not an easy job. And I got to give huge kudos to the CodeEnvy developers. A lot of them worked on this, worked really hard. They did a hackathon for about 2 weeks, very little sleep, and did what seemed to be the near impossible. So now all you really need to do is type docker run CodeEnvy/CLI start, and this will start to get CodeEnvy set up for you on your own system. The CLI is going to be identical between CodeEnvy and Che. And of course, because it's Docker, it's going to work on Windows, it's going to work on Mac, it's going to work on Linux. So super flexible, super easy. We're so excited about this. Like, it's going to make it a lot easier for people to jump in and get started with CodeEnvy. All right, so CodeEnvy 5, you guys have heard about all the benefits of Che 5. So of course, all that stuff comes in CodeEnvy. But CodeEnvy adds a bunch of improvements as well for developers. I talked about Dockerized CodeEnvy. One of the things that Dockerized CodeEnvy does as well is it allows for offline install. We've got a lot of secure environments looking at CodeEnvy, and it's really helpful for them to be able to download on one node which has internet access, scan it, make sure everything's clean, and then move it to a secure environment that does not have internet access. You can do that. GitLab integration has been added. We've really expanded the LDAP support in response to a lot of our enterprise customers. Really great LDAP support now. Big shout out again to the team for doing that. And then the organizations model, as I talked about, is added now. Permissions, resource granularity, all sorts of good stuff like that. And then there's a bunch of changes as well for the DevOps guys. So I mentioned that it's not just developers that love this once it gets into an organization, it is those ops teams. So for the ops perspective, some big news is we've reduced the number of ports that need to be opened. And that's always kind of thumbs up from the security teams. We've added auditing for workspaces and user access. I'm going to show that next, actually. Support for AWS ECR registries. We've kind of improved the workflow around snapshotting. So it's a little bit easier to understand kind of what's happening and where snapshots are and how you do them and all that good stuff. We've centralized the data stores into a single encrypted database. So that's nice, and offered cross-platform backup and recovery. So a ton of really great stuff being added. And you see it's all kind of very enterprise focused on top of the goodness already in Che 5. So CodeEnvy auditing, this is, I think, going to be a big deal. Again, I talked earlier at in the session about how security is one of the big benefits of CodeEnvy to these large organizations, and this is another aspect to that. It really helps to show, from an auditing perspective, how many users are using this, how many users are licensed, am I running up against my license issues? How many workspaces are different people using? What kind of permissions are they setting on them? Are there workspaces that are getting old that maybe I can clean up, that maybe I don't need anymore? I can reclaim some space in my image cache, all sorts of good stuff like that. So that's going to help in management. And that is that. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining. Up next, you're going to be stuck with me again. So I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about becoming part of the project. And we're really excited to have such a vibrant community here at Che. So want to help you guys get oriented and figure out how you can kind of take your participation in Che to the next level. All right, so I think we're going to need probably about 2-3 minutes to flip over to the next session. You guys get pulled over there as before, and I will join you in about 2 or 3 minutes time.
Yep. Thank you, Brad. So that concludes everything that we've got for this session for CodeMV Che for Enterprises. James is going to host the next session, which will become part of the project with Tyler Jewell and Brad Mickley with the CodeMV team. You're going to get pulled over in just a minute, and you'll be automatically redirected to the next session. Thank you again for being a part of the CheConf 2016.